Hi everybody, I'm jonathonzuzga with ZUMA Concepts. I'm bringing you a video today on the Ravin crossbow. I've owned one of these things now for a few years, learned quite a bit about it, and I'd like to share that stuff with you to help save you some money, build your confidence, and help you maintain some accuracy with this thing over time. Stay tuned and I'll be covering all that with you. So the first thing I want to cover with you is the scope. When I first bought this thing, it had the standard scope on it with the little lines in it and then the numbers, and I worked with this thing and had it sighted in, and I was somewhat happy with it, but I just wasn't seeing what I wanted to see out past 80 yards. The other issue I have with that is my kids hunt with this primarily, and I'm always nervous that with an animal in front of them, they're going to get excited or they're going to goof something up and they're going to use the wrong mark, and I really don't want to put them in a position to miss or wound an animal. It's devastating when we do it as adults. It's even worse for a kid. So the first thing that I looked at changing out on this thing was going to a single optic scope, and the way to do that is with an adjustable mount. And all the new Ravin crossbows have this as a premium option. I will say that I believe this is a better option than those just because of the flexibility. And I'll get into that a little bit here in a second on how this is more flexible than your Ravin. When I went into this scope, the one I selected is the Super 6 by C-Cop. This is the same scope I use on my AR. It has the A4 reticle, which is just a single dot in the center that illuminates, and it has variable light settings for how bright that can be. Very helpful scope to use at dusk and in the mornings. Really like it. If you're hunting early in the morning, I'm sure you guys have experienced this. Your crosshairs match the animal. It doesn't matter if it's a turkey or a deer or a bear. Everything looks black early or late in the day. And this gives you a little, just a lightly illuminated dot. And what I've found is that other illuminated scopes where the whole crosshairs do it, it bleaches out the sight and you can't even see what's on the other end of the scope anyway. So being able to adjust that down with a rheostat and getting real close or real fine tuned, I've had a lot of success. Another scope brand that does an awesome job with that is Loophole. I use this on all of my deer hunting rifles. This is the illuminated fire dot duplex. I love this scope. So another option, a little pricey, but another option for you guys, but it has that same, fire dot sight. Back to this setup. Another item that I noticed I ran into a problem with was when I was in the blind with the kids, I couldn't see this dial. I couldn't make an adjustment on it because it was just too dark in there. And luckily, you know, I practiced out of the blind with the kids, so I identified this before we ended up out in the field. But my solution for that is a rheostat sight light that you get for your compound bow. They make them by TRUGLO, real easy to pick up. And then I just took and modified a pipe clamp and bolted this thing in place and then aimed it right directly at my reel so I could see, and then I could adjust the brightness of that so that I could see what I was doing. It works great for me, but when I'm sitting next to the kids, it makes it super easy for me to adjust that quick. And with it being that purple light, it's not blinding the kids here with their eyes and making their eyes adjust, and then they can't see through the scope. So it was a really good solution for that problem. Another thing that I identified, when you get out long range with these bows, level is critical. I have this bow sighted in for 135 yards. I can shoot it accurately. I haven't shot a deer that far. I think the farthest I've taken a deer with this is 80 yards. But having that bubble level is critical. So all of this together is pretty important that you have it level, the setup of this, the piece of tooling that you use when you're setting up your scope, I recommend, is this Wheeler Engineering. It's the same kit you use for mounting a scope on a rifle. I don't use this one. I only use this one. I put the bow in a vise, and I level it in the vise. Then I move this up to the scope, and I maintain the bubble level while I'm tightening it down. This is a good purchase if you're going to do that yourself. Again, most pro shops will do this for you if you buy the scope from them. The next thing that is super critical when you're shooting that long range with these things is maintaining the feet per second. And what I mean by that is the first time I took this out, the second season, it was shooting all over the place and I couldn't figure out what was going on. So I had to hit the drawing board and kind of figure it out. First thing I did was I adjusted the scope. I thought the scope got bumped or something during the off season. And what I found is when I adjusted it out for those longer ranges and I came in, I was shooting too high at the closer ranges. So something was telling me that the bow wasn't shooting the same as it used to. I mean, I looked at everything. I looked at the arrow rest. I was stumped by it for a minute, and that's what got me to buy the chronograph. What I do is I change my own strings, and as soon as I change it, I swap out, or I shoot through here and document what my feet per second were. And then periodically through the season, I'll check to make sure my feet per second are staying accurate, because if my feet per second are changing, my scope settings changed. Now I don't have that confidence to shoot at a deer past 60 yards because I'm worried that I might not be accurate anymore. So now I at least know to take it out and hit the range and make sure I'm on before I go out for the evening and I don't screw up and miss a big deer. Super helpful. I also acquired my own bow vise so that I could change my strings myself. You don't need to do this. There's really no need for it. I'm a do-it-myselfer. I like to learn things. I like to do things on my own. I buy my own string kits and I make my own changes. But if you buy these string kits at any archery shop, they'll change them for free. So there's really no point in going this far. I just like to have everything at my fingertips. I live in a small town far away from the city where I can get this stuff easily. So when I have a day to play, I want to be ready to play and I want the stuff in front of me. So not necessary, but an option for you guys. Moving on from doing your own equipment, the next thing that I looked at when I started to work on this is I couldn't get it to maintain a good shot out past 80 yards. And when I say a good shot, I mean, I'm not confident shooting an arrow that can only hold an 8-inch group to a 10-inch group. And what I identified was the arrows that they send me with this bow are .003 straightness. That's not what's needed when you're shooting at that kind of range. And I learned this early. I actually shoot my compound bow out past 100 yards. And it was something I obsessed with a few years back, and one of the first things I learned was arrow straightness. I couldn't maintain a good shot with my bow outside of 60 yards if I didn't have a .001 straightness arrow, which is a precision, it's the high-end arrow that all the pros that shoot competition use. So I did the research and I looked, and sure enough, Ravin has it. There it is, the .001. This is their premium arrow. These things are $120 for a 3-pack. Outrageous, but required if you're going to be trying to do anything out past 80 yards every day with this thing, or something you can count on. You got to get this arrow. Now, along with that arrow, there's a lot of variables that go into your arrow. I did some research on arrows. Stay tuned for the end of this. I'm actually going to show you how to build that arrow with a different arrow that it's not recommended. Ravin will not warranty their bows if you do what I show you at the end of this. I personally don't care. I've been doing it for 5 years, never had an issue, shoots great. The arrows I found are the same brand as the arrows I just showed you. They're the same weight, everything's the same. The one thing that Ravin did that they made it really difficult on the consumer to copy or to build their own equipment at a cheaper rate was they changed the Nock bushing. And it used to be a common Nock bushing that you could get from Gold Tip, but Gold Tip discontinued it, and I'm assuming that Ravin asked them to do it. So being that it was a common size, there still is an aftermarket company that makes them, and I have an affiliate link, or not an affiliate link, I just have a link below that'll help you find that, and when I get to that part, I'll go into more detail on it with you. But once I had the arrows figured out, now I have most of the variables knocked out of this thing. I was able to shoot accurately, 80, 100, 110, 120, 130. Couldn't do it before with the lesser arrows, got the better arrows. Now I started to find, man, I need to wait to keep this thing consistent outside of shooting off a bench, a rifle bench. So what I did is I bought this, the Caldwell tripod. This thing right here is a lifesaver. It's excellent for my kids. I use it when I'm taking this thing out to do long range shooting. Coupled with this, a really great investment is this tripod chair. I got this at Cabela's. I also have a link for this at the bottom of the site. This has adjustable legs, so if you're on uneven ground, you can set that up, and the triangle seat allows you to get in tight on this frame. If you bring a square chair in here, it's really hard to get in on this thing and get comfortable for a shot. When you're shooting something like this out to 100, 135 yards, you have to be absolutely precise. Everything you do matters. You got to be level. You got to have a nice solid rest. You got to be breathing right. They're all critical. Shooting 135 yards with a bow is like shooting 1,000 yards with a 338 Lapua. There's a lot of variables and you have to be conscious of them. Next thing I want to share with you, target selection. I screwed up. When I was learning how to get used to this bow, I had an old worn out target and I shot it a few times with an expensive arrow and blew the fletchings right off because I was just going straight through. So you're gonna want to find yourself a 450 feet per second target. I've linked these below so you could get these exact ones. Now the reason I have a big one and a small one, or a small one and a big one, my big one's 425. Once you get out long range, which is the only time I use this bigger one, and I like to have a bigger target, especially when I'm sighting it in, it gives you the ability to shoot at something a little bit bigger, a little more freedom to make some adjustments, and as you're getting better at shooting at that range. You can go with a 425 because once you get out past 80 yards, you're not shooting at that 435 feet per second that this bow is rated for. The arrow's lost a lot of energy, a lot of inertia. It's safe to use this target and not ruin your vanes. Definitely worth the investment to buy the right target because you're going to be really sad the day you blow the vanes off your $130 arrows. Another investment I made, I've used a canvas bag before. I had one initially with this. I started to get nervous with how precision it was, so I went and bought the coffin case. Absolutely love the case. Rock solid, it works great. I had a soft case that I used for one of my kids' Parker bows before, and my daughter's bow got bumped in the truck one time, didn't know it. She missed a deer. It was a sad day out in the field, but I learned my lesson. Now I use the hard cases. So, covered the scope, covered the arrows, covered the rest, targets, seat. Next problem I ran into with this thing, I was out one evening with my daughter, again, poor girl, she has to learn all of her hard lessons through her dad. I had her taking a shot at a doe during late doe season. It was 90 yards away. And I had confidence in the bow. It was shooting great. I wasn't concerned. She's an absolute dead eye. She shot a nice 8-point at 300 yards last season. So I know she can do it. I know the bow can do it. So I go ahead and I let her run an arrow out there, and it gets about 50 yards from this deer and it just gone. And it was a tough day for her. She felt bad. She thought she screwed it up, but I could tell something went wrong with the equipment. So I took it back, took it to the range, and rather than shooting practice points this time, I was shooting her broadheads, which were the Rage expandables. And it did the same thing in the range. So what I figured out is on these Rage broadheads, there's enough turbulence coming from those blades sticking out. When you're shooting this kind of a bow at that range, you start to lose that speed, everything starts to become relevant, and it's too much wind disruption and it deflects your shot. The solution I found for that, I did some research and found some absolutely amazing broadheads. This technology is just exceptional. It's the HPX by Thorn. These are a fully contained mechanical broadhead. There is nothing sticking out of these things. And the way it works is the tip compresses and shears a rubber pin that's in here that deploys the blades. Another great feature about this is it comes with this little yellow clip that you pop on the front of the broadhead, and it prevents it from opening, so you can target practice with the broadhead you're hunting with, which I highly recommend. Anytime you can use the equipment that you hunt with to practice with, you're days and miles ahead, because then you have the guarantee things are going to work for you. Love these broadheads. Again, they're linked below. I'm also going to do a follow-up video with you guys. I'm going to cover how to set this rest up and why it's so important. Earlier I was saying that I prefer this rest because it gives you more versatility, and this is what I mean. No matter what your setup is, if your string starts to weaken, your scope is not going to shoot the same, and if you have a predetermined dial from the manufacturer, you can't adjust it. Now, your only option at this point is go buy a new string. Where with this setup, you can peel off these numbers, re-sight it in with the worn string, replace all of your numbers. You might lose some yardage. You might not be shooting 135 yards anymore. You might only be shooting 110, but you're going to get one more season out of your string. You're going to save a little bit of money. You can't do that with your Ravin setups. This is an aftermarket option, and it's something that I don't personally do. I change the string. But maybe you're not the guy that wants to change the string every season. You're happy with a 100-yard shot, and you don't need to do that. This is an option. Peel this tape off, sight it in for the season, and just keep an eye on it with your chronograph. If you start to drop more, I'd recommend a string change. So all of that being said, the last thing I have to cover with you, here's something that's really important. A lot of us go out in the field and we take an extra arrow with us. We take it for varmints, coyotes, possums, coons, whatever it might be. When you're shooting something this accurate and you want that dependability, you may not want to be launching your high-end arrow down there with an additional $15 Luminoc. You know, you're going to put some of your junkier stuff on there, and that may include not using your Luminoc. If that's the case, I'd recommend you do something along these lines. I got my small gram scale out, not a drug dealer. I bought this just for this reason. And I pulled apart one of my arrows so that I could get my Luminoc out of there. I weighed the Luminoc. Then I put the standard Nock on there, the generic, the cheap one, and I figured out what the difference was, and I cut off a piece of wire hanger that made up the difference, and I epoxied it into the back of it. Now I have a completely balanced arrow, and I don't have to launch my expensive Luminoc out there, because heaven forbid if it's an arrow that, who knows, runs off in the leg of a coyote or something, or bounces off of a ditch bank and it's gone forever, you don't want to lose that extra money. This is just an option. I use these for target sometimes, but like I said, I'm more of an original equipment guy. I practice with my Luminocs. I practice with my Thorn broadheads. I use everything in the target range that I would use in the field, and it's so that I have that confidence going out there and I'm able to kill that deer or whatever I'm hunting. Now that I've covered all of that, I'm going to go into the thing that Ravin is going to hate me for, and hopefully you guys love me for. I'm going to cover the arrows. So when I first started shooting this, I can't stomach paying this money. There's no way. I'm not paying that much money for an arrow that I'm going to lose, shoot, break. Just ain't happening. So I immediately was looking for options, and the way I did it is I tore the sucker apart. Tore it apart. I was measuring it with my mic. I did everything I needed to figure out what this was and how I could mimic it. Well, when I did it, they were still printing the name of the manufacturer on here, and they don't anymore. But at the time, a few years back, they were still printing on there where the arrow came from. And the arrow came from Black Eagle arrows. And it's actually the exact same profile as the Black Eagle arrow Zombie Slayer. The Zombie Slayer is a .001, all the same weights and specs, no difference. And the beauty of this is, well, let me back up from the beauty. Let me tell you the one thing that they really hose you on. So Ravin made the insert, and I talked about this a minute ago. Ravin made the insert unique to their Nock. So you can't just buy an arrow and shove their Nock in it. You have to have the bushing size. Well, like I was saying, Gold Tip used to make this bushing size, and they quit. Magically, they quit around the same time Ravin came out with their high-performance equipment. Luckily, there's an aftermarket manufacturer who makes these. I have a link below. It's not an affiliate link. It's just a link, but I want you to have them. This is going to save you some money if you're interested. Just keep in mind, your warranty's out the window, according to Ravin, if you use these. So all you do is you buy these off the website I showed you. You take your new arrow. It's this simple. Take that out. You epoxy. Get the highest PSI epoxy you can get, because these arrows are going through a heck of a beating. Epoxy this new sleeve in, this bushing. And now you got an arrow that'll take your Ravin crossbow nocks. just like that. This is the premium arrow. That's why I buy these separate. I build my own arrows. I hunt with zombie slayers. There they are, as worn out as they can be. There's my Thorns. Never had an issue with them. They shoot phenomenal. That's what I shoot 135 yards with. So I pretty much covered everything here. Went over the broadheads, went over the scope, went over the arrows, gave you a way to save a little money. I hope you enjoy that. Hope you enjoyed everything. If you have anything you want me to take a look at, I love a challenge. I love figuring things out. I love helping people. So if I can save you some money and go through a project on my own, make a recommendation. If it's cool enough, I'll definitely do it. Make a video and share it on YouTube and on my website. So below you'll see a link to my website as well. It's zumavision.com. Name of my company is ZUMA Concepts. I do a lot of other stuff besides hunting. You'll see if you go to my website, you can check out some of the other stuff that I've worked on and done. But hopefully I've helped you out, and hopefully I can help you in the future.